Hey everyone, Bradley Jack Design here with another design breakdown, this time my Khalil Mack graphic from my 365-day project. So there's a lot going on in this design, so I'm just going to break it down for you and show you how I was able to create this design. If you've seen some of my design breakdowns before, a lot of this on this side will look the same. I've got a background, I've got a folder with the text, a folder with him himself, some lighting effects, and some final lookups and some color correction on top of it. So I'm going to expand all of these and get rid of everything so I can show you how this was built from the ground up. Alright, so first things first, I use the Chicago Bears blue as a background. I have this photo I took of Soldier Field that I was able to use by itself. I've got a paper texture on top of it with a gradient map on top of it just to add a little bit of texture to it. The gradient map is black and white just so the color from this original file doesn't come through. Same thing with this stock image here of a vignette, just a vignette up at the top. The reason I don't have it down here is because I actually have this file here that has some grass on it. And if I disable this layer mask, you can see what the original image is. So I just masked it so it was just the grass below it. On top of all of this, I have a gradient map from black to the Chicago Bears blue just to have a very subtle textured background. I also have this sort of futuristic-y light texture I have added on top of it. And I have a gradient map with the Bears blue and the Bears orange on top of it. Actually, that's black and orange, just to add a little bit more of the orange from the Chicago Bears on top of it. If we go up, I'll get back to this Mack shadow. If you watched my video on how to mask a player, you know I usually mask a clipped version and then a shadow version. So if I disable this layer mask, turn this on, and turn this photo on, you can see what I have is the original photo clipped and then the background photo behind it. The background photo I have masked to just where the shadow is underneath Aaron Rodgers and Khalil Mack. I have a gradient map on top of that that's black and white to make it black and white so there's no weird green below it. So now he looks pretty grounded in the scene. Now this is the original photo. This is the photo I actually used in the design. If you've watched my video on how to edit an image, this is actually all of the final editing I've done in order to get this effect. So next what we have is the text. Now the text is a little tricky. This is the final text. This is actually a smart object I created because it has a displacement on it. I'm going to show you guys a whole completely different video on how to use displacement maps. But basically, in order to group it, so it's the only way I was able to get it to correctly screen everything that I wanted on there. So if I just make a new layer and put black behind it, you see this is what the text looks like. So what this is made up of is just his name, Mack, which has a couple of his images which are set to luminosity on top of it. If you set something to luminosity, it sort of makes it black and white. It makes it whatever the color is. It just makes it so whatever the darkness is of that is changing the darkness of the color below. So since this is white, it is black and white. I have his name above it, and then I basically made copies of each of these layers, set them to smart objects, and then set different Gaussian blurs to it to subtly blur the lettering. And that essentially will give you this sort of glowing effect as if it is an actual light. So I had that as one original group in this design, and then I set it to a smart object in order to add this displacement to it. So if I click displace, you can see that's how I was able to get this jagged effect on it. I'm going to do a completely other different video on how to use displacement maps, so I'm not going to show you the details of that now, but you can play around with displacement maps or look it up. They're pretty interesting. Now this looks kind of weird because there's this light. I want to make this realistic to actually show it's emitting light. So on top of my regular Mack layer, I have this glow layer where basically I took a soft white brush and just brushed around where any parts of the light should be sort of bleeding on top of Khalil Mack and Aaron Rodgers. Above that, I added a bunch of different lighting effects. So I have this sort of spotlight stock image I like to use often that is basically making this sort of circle here at the bottom realistic. So there's lighting coming from the top. I've set that as sort of a secondary light source. And then on top of that, I have these sort of just spots of light. If I go to this actual smart object, it can show you what it actually is. So you can see it's just this. It's just a little bit of light, sort of dust that goes on top of it. I have this cool bokeh, sort of rainbow light at the top. Again, it's going off that there's light source is coming from the top here onto the bottom. And then on top of all this, I've got a gradient map, a curves layer, color lookup, color lookup. So the gradient map I have is the Chicago Bears blue on the left, orange, and then white on the right. And this is actually set to soft light at 20%. So you can see what it does. It doesn't change the photo much. It adds a little bit more orange overall to the image itself. I have then a curves layer set to 30%. Let's see why. It just adds a little bit more contrast, darkens up the background a little bit. And then I have two color lookups. I've got futuristic bleak and the Kodak 2395. This 2395 you're going to see a lot in my designs, and you'll see them a lot in designs in the community. Basically what it does, if I set it to 100%, it sort of decontrasts the whole image. I like to use it set at a different opacity. So for this instance, it's set to 25, or sorry, it's set to 75, just because the full opacity can make things look absolutely terrible. But then I have this futuristic bleak set to 30%, which you can barely see what it does. But if I turn this off, it might show up a little better. So you can see it adds just sort of a yellowness to the whole image itself. So with these final color lookups on there, you can really see what this one does once I have everything else applied. But that's the Khalil Mack graphic in itself. I've got some color lookups, lighting effects, Mack himself with some text, and the background. So pretty simple. Most of the designs I do are going to be similar to this. There's going to be a background, final lighting effects up at the top, and then everything subject-wise in the middle. I hope you guys enjoyed this and learned a lot. I'll make sure to make some tutorial videos. If there's a tutorial that you want me to show you based on something you saw in here, let me know in the comments below. Other than that, thanks for watching, and like and subscribe. Thanks.